JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It is a lightweight data interchange format based on a subset of JavaScript. We use it to exchange data between the client side and the server side. Compared with other data interchange formats like XML, JSON is easier to read and execute, so both humans and machines love it. Although based on JavaScript, JSON's application range is well beyond that. It has equivalencies in almost every major language. Besides, in order to keep pace with tech developments, all major languages have introduced methods and functions to help us process JSON. In JS, JSON's equivalency is object literal. PHP uses associative array or object as equivalency for JSON. At the HTTP side, JSON's equivalency is a JSON string. JSON string refers to texts that match the JSON grammar standard. So, what is the JSON grammar standard? Name and value are connected using a colon. Both name and string type value are wrapped in double quotes. It has to be double quotes. Non-string type value can be left unwrapped. Name value pairs are separated by comma. Behind the last name value pair, there must be no comma. All name value pairs are wrapped in a set of curly brackets. There are many websites offering free JSON format validating services. Some even offer to convert JSON into other formats for you. Now let's take a look at how JSON helps us exchange data between the client side and the server side. Let's say we got a web app. The client side is powered by JavaScript and the server side by PHP. We use AJAX to transport data between them. The client side collects data from users and puts them in object literal for easier management. But the problem is we cannot directly send a JS object literal to the server side. The HTTP protocol does not support it. PHP does not understand it either. We must convert a JS object literal into a JSON string first. The stringify method is what we use to do the conversion. We have two types of stringify method to choose from. The first one is JSON.stringify. It is a native JS method. You can use it directly in your JS program. The second option is QS.stringify. It belongs to the QS package. Before you can use it, you need to install the QS package first. After we have got the JSON string, we can send it to the backend program using AJAX. The server side also uses JSON to send data to the client side. To convert a JSON string back into a JS object literal, we need the parse method. Just like stringify, parse comes from two places, JSON or QS. A little summary here. Stringify converts JS object literal into JSON string. Parse converts JSON string back into JS object literal. In other words, stringify is for sending data out, and parse for receiving data. Apart from parse, the native JS function eval can also convert JSON string into a JS object literal. But eval is not as safe as parse, so stick with parse and avoid eval. Next, let's go to the server side. At the PHP side, we can access client-side data from the global variable get or post. At this moment, every info is buried in the JSON string as characters. Retrieving those info is very difficult. We need to convert JSON string to its PHP equivalency, associative array or object. JSON_decode can help us do the conversion. By default, JSON decode will convert a JSON string into an object. But if you want an associative array, you set its second argument value to true. To send data to the client side, we need to convert array or object into a JSON string. You need JSON_encode for this job. After you have got the JSON string, all you need to do is to echo it. The AJAX program will fetch the JSON string and send it to the client side, where the parse method will convert it into a JS object literal. In summary, data communication between the front-end and back-end program is a process of making conversions between JSON string and objects or arrays. At the client side, we stringify an object literal into a JSON string and send that string to the server side via AJAX. At the server side, we decode that JSON string into associative array or object. To send data to the client side, we first encode the associative array or object into a JSON string. Then we echo that JSON string. The AJAX program will fetch that string and send it back to the client side, where the parse method will convert it into JS object literal. Basically, JSON works as a medium that can be understood by both sides.